The film begins with Ellie, dancing in her room. She is an aspiring fashion designer and lives with her Gran Peggy. Ellie has been mourning the loss of her mother, who sometimes appears to her in mirror reflections. Peggy shows Ellie a letter informing her that she has been accepted into a fashion school in London. Ellie is thrilled, but Peggy warns her about the dangers she might face there and expresses concern because Ellie has the ability to see things others cannot. However, Peggy supports Ellie's decision to go because it is her dream and also the dream of her mother. Ellie takes a train to London and is driven to her dormitory. The cab driver makes unsettling comments, so Ellie gets off at a shop and waits for him to leave before continuing to her dorm. She arrives and meets her roommate, Jocasta. Ellie goes out with Jocasta and her friends, where it is revealed that Ellie's mother died by suicide after struggling with mental illness. In the bathroom, Ellie overhears Jocasta bad-mouthing her to the other girls. She leaves the pub and walks back to her room, but notices an older man smirking at her. Later, while Ellie tries to sleep, she hears a party outside and meets a young man named John, the only student who tries to befriend her. The next morning, Ellie wakes up late and rushes to class, making it just in time for attendance. She decides to find a place of her own for some peace of mind. She finds a room in a house managed by a woman named Miss Collins, who gives Ellie a set of rules to follow. Ellie is required to pay 2 months' rent in advance and a 2-month deposit because previous tenants left after the first night. Miss Collins allows Ellie to stay in the upstairs bedroom. Ellie likes the place and rests for the night, sleeping all the way under the covers. When she gets out of bed, she finds herself somehow in the 1960s. She walks into a venue called Café de Paris and sees her reflection as another young woman named Sandy. Ellie follows her as if she is there, watching everything unfold. Sandy wants to be a singer at the venue, but faces unwanted attention from a surly patron. She is told to speak to a man named Jack about being a singer. Sandy meets Jack and is charmed by him. They dance together until the patron makes rude comments. Jack punches him in the face and runs away with Sandy. After they escape, he offers to drive her home. It turns out her address is the same as Ellie's. After that, Ellie finds Sandy in her bed, but when she tries to touch her, she wakes up back in the present. At school, Ellie becomes inspired to create a design based on what Sandy wears in her dreams. Later, Ellie goes back to sleep, hoping to return to the 60s again. In the dream, she finds Jack knocking on the door, and he takes her to meet the owner of another venue, the Rialto, so she can sing for him. The men there note that she can definitely sing. Outside, he asks if her real name is Sandy. She says no, but it is her nickname for Alexandra and mentions that he will be her special assistant. Ellie dyes her hair blonde like Sandy and searches for the dress Sandy was wearing. It is very expensive, but she buys it and continues to work on her dress design, which her teacher seems to like. Jocasta mocks her out of pettiness. Later, Ellie sees the venue where she saw Sandy perform, as it appears in the present day. She feels that what she saw in her dream was real. She goes to a pub and asks for a job. As she heads back to her room, the old man who saw her the other night follows her and claims to recognize her because of her hair, but he insists he is not trying to pick her up. He asks about her name and her mother's name. She tells him her mother is dead and leaves him. Ellie returns to the 60s and goes to the Rialto, but she finds Sandy dancing as a backup for a woman performing as a marionette. Meanwhile, she sees Jack telling Sandy that if she wants to succeed in the music business, she has to please certain men. Ellie sees Sandy in the bedroom with a lecherous man entering the room. She screams at him and he appears to hear her, but Ellie wakes up. The experience causes Ellie to tear up the pink dress design she originally drew in class. She continues to get through work and school. On her next trip to the 60s, she sees that Sandy is becoming more jaded and unhappy as Jack forces her into many forbidden things, like prostitution, drug and alcohol dealing, and using fake names like Alex and Lexi. only one man does not take advantage of her and is charming to her. He asks her about her name and she asks if he is a police officer. He says she deserves a better life than the one she is in and that if she looks at herself in the mirror, she will know. It seems that Ellie is a reflection of the innocent truth on Sandy's face. Sandy talks down about herself, while Ellie tries to get her attention through the mirror. She manages to smash through the glass and grab Sandy, but when she wakes up, she sees people without faces in the room. Ellie gets tired of lack of sleep and goes to her college until night, afraid to go home. John sees that Ellie is looking unwell, so he invites her out to a Halloween party. Jocasta and her friends see them together and give them drinks. They all start dancing, but in the middle of things, Ellie sees ghoulish visions of the men who took advantage of Sandy and herself dancing alone. John takes Ellie home when he sees her looking bad. In the room, Ellie has a new dream that shows Jack attacking Sandy. Ellie starts yelling at him to get off her, but Jack stabs Sandy to death. Miss Collins overhears the noise and orders John to leave, as one of her rules is not to have male visitors. She simply tells Ellie to go to bed. The next day, Ellie apologizes to Miss Collins for what happened and asks her if anyone died in her room or if she knows a woman named Sandy. But Miss Collins is dodgy about it. Later, Ellie runs to the police station to report the murder, believing that the old man is Jack and that he got away with killing Sandy. The detectives don't believe her. She goes to the library with John to search for cases of disappearances and murders in the 60s. Surprisingly, they find out that most of the disappearances were of men, not women. And the strange thing is that they disappeared after a night in her neighborhood in Soho. She begins to hallucinate the ghost men following her around the library, nearly leading her to stab Jocasta in the face. John runs after Jocasta to explain things, while Ellie leaves in a panic. Ellie arrives late for work and finds that the old man is waiting for her. She takes out her phone to try and record a confession from him, but when she brings up Sandy, he says Alex killed Sandy and that whatever happened to her was something she got herself into. Ellie runs after the man, but he gets hit by a car on the street and dies. His manager tells someone to call for help and says he's a former cop named Lindsay. She realizes the man is not Jack, but rather the man who was polite to her. Ellie asks John for help to go back to her grandmother. They arrive at the home so she can collect her belongings, and she tells John to enter the home if she is late. Miss Collins opens the door and gives Ellie tea to calm her. She gives her some letters of her own. Ellie finds that there are letters in the name Alexandra, Sandy's real name. It seems Miss Collins knows Ellie was at the police station because she tells Ellie that some police officers were here this morning to check if anything strange happened before, like murders. She reveals that her name is Alexandra in a letter, which is what Sandy told Jack before. Because of all the abuse in her life, she decided to stab Jack to death. He lied about making her a singer and forced her into prostitution. Not only him, but everyone who tried to approach her. Finally, she got revenge on all the men who abused her by murdering them. Meanwhile, Miss Collins says that she poisoned Ellie's tea and will make it look like a suicide. John notices that Ellie is late, so he enters looking for her. She regains enough strength to warn John to run, but Miss Collins stabs him. Ellie tries to run upstairs, seeing the younger Sandy attacking her. A fire starts and begins spreading. Ellie locks herself in her room, where the spirits of Sandy's victims break through the floors and walls, begging Ellie to kill Miss Collins. The reason Ellie sees people without faces is that Sandy saw them that way. When Miss Collins finally breaks in, she sees her reflection as Sandy and realizes she has become just as much of a monster as the men who hurt her. She tries to slit her throat, but Ellie stops her and tries to help. However, Miss Collins chooses to stay and die in the fire while letting Ellie go. Ellie gets John out of there as medics arrive, and Miss Collins allows the flames to consume her. Sometime later, Ellie presents her work at a fashion show. Her grandmother is there and is very proud of Ellie. John is in attendance to cheer her on along with the rest of the audience. She sees her mother in the mirror as in the past and seems to return to her life. As they come to congratulate her, Ellie sees Sandy's reflection in the mirror, waving at her. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, so you never miss our future explorations of timeless classics and hidden gems. Until then, happy watching, and I'll catch you in the comments.